positive. Floating point have a decimal place, and strings are basically uh, letters, numbers. So we're representing the literal, all right, of a number of characters. That's probably the better word for it. We just want those characters represented, whether it be a number. Okay, we can have a string number, right? We have the number one and represent as a string. Okay, or we can have the word one, O-N-E. All right, they both can be strings. So when we work with strings, okay, we use a single quotation mark. Single quotation mark, right? And of course, any programming language has to start off with a hello world. All right. If I failed, for instance, if I failed to put in close the second quotation mark, I get a syntax error. Okay. It's scanning a string literal. All right. It didn't get the second quotation mark, throws an error. Same thing would happen. Okay. If I left off the first one. Okay. So there's various types of data that we can work with, and as we go through the class, we'll go through more. But the most important different types here are numbers and strings. All right. Once again, no different than any other programming language, right? But I'm not assuming that you have had other programming languages. All right. So let's go then talk about string concatenation. Okay. Steve says, can you print with a new line? Steve, we'll get to that, okay? And you're moving ahead, all right? So let's go ahead and talk about string concatenation. What we're going to do is concatenation is a programming language. It's used in programming languages to be able to take various strings and put them together. That's what concatenation. Have you ever wondered where that word cat in Linux comes from? It comes from concatenation, which is what we're going to be doing next. Also, it probably will work a little better if I zoom in here so you can see. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see the text a little better. All right, it's a little bit larger now. So let's go ahead and look at some concatenation. Basically, in Python, this is typical in a lot of programming languages as well. It uses a plus for concatenation, so that if we wanted to go ahead and put two words together, all right, into a single string, we could go, Alice. Of course, there's always Alice and Bob, all right? Alice and Bob. These guys are together all the time. Alice plus Bob. I keep on hitting the double quotation by mistake. Okay, single quote. And we get Alice Bob. Now, you can see that's not very human readable, right? And you end up with Alice Bob. So generally when you're trying to put these two together, you'll try to put a space. You could do this, all right? Up arrow, and I could go ahead and put in a space like this. All right, and then you get Alice Bob. But it's probably simpler to just go ahead and put in a space before Bob or after Alice. So if you're trying to get something that's human readable, you're concatenating, you can do either one of those two. I tend to, depend upon the situation, but I tend to do the second one because it saves some typing, right? Just a little simpler. If I try to go ahead and say concatenate Alice to say 56, okay, it'll throw an error message. can only concatenate string, not int to string, okay? But we can resolve that, okay? We'll see that a little later on, all right, where we can actually convert. We have a function that'll convert numbers into strings, all right? Let's see, what else do we want to do here? Let's work a little bit with variables, all right? So variables are just a place that holds a value. So a variable can hold a number, it can hold a string, all right? So what we're going to be doing is working with some variables, some simple variables. So we can go ahead and from the interactive shell, we can say, let's see, what are we going to call this? Let's call it variable, okay? Variable, okay, is equal to 34. All right, and then we're going to go variable. And when we invoke the variable, okay, it comes back with 34. So we have, whenever we go ahead and use this variable name, okay, it's going to always come back with the number 34. Let's put another variable. Let's call it the variable 2. All right. And we're going to, inside variable 2, we're going to go ahead and put in the number 3. Okay. Now we can go ahead and invoke both of these variables, and we can put them into an expression. All right. So we can go variable, this variable, it's not variable 1, okay, plus, okay, variable 2. And you can see we just went ahead and added those two together. So variable 1 has 34 in it, variable 2 has 3 in it, we add them together and we get 37, okay? Let's see. What else do we want to do here before we get started? Okay. Oh, we want to talk about variable names. All right. You can see I just used, it's probably not a good idea to use the word variable in the name of your variable. All right. I just use that for demonstration purposes. You should put something in there that helps you remember what it is, what's supposed to be in there. Right. So you might put in, let's create a variable. So number of Python attendees. All right. Oh, spell it right. Attendees. All right. And that's going to be, in this case, we have what? 8 people. All right. And then when I want to go ahead and invoke that, I get 8. All right. So when we create our variables, okay, it can be only one word. It can only be letters, numbers, and the underscore. So let's go ahead and let's try using some of those. All right. So here's our number of attendees. We could go ahead and use underscores. Okay. Number of Python attendees. And we'll put 7. Okay. And then let's go ahead and invoke that. You can see that comes up with 7. Okay. So underscores are fine. It can only be letters. It could be numbers too. Okay, so let's go create one with numbers. Python V2 attendees. So we got a number in there. And we're going to put in 23. And then invoke that. 23. And it cannot begin with a number. All right, so what happens if we go ahead and do, let's go ahead and change this to 2. Okay, syntax error. Invalid syntax. Okay, you cannot start a variable with a number. Okay, but you can put numbers anywhere else in it, but just not at the start. Okay. Also, Python is case sensitive. So variable names are case sensitive. So that something like Python attendees, okay, is different variable from Python attendees, Python v2 attendees. Let's put a number in there. And then we can invoke that. Oops. Okay, Python v2, yeah, lowercase is 11. All right, the uppercase is 23. All right, 2 different variables. Okay. Let's see, what else do we want to cover here in this very first section? Let's go, let's create a very simple program. All right. Also, we want to introduce the concept of a comment. Let's go back to our presentation and just talk a little bit about some of these things if you're not familiar with them. If you've done any other programming language, you are familiar with them. So we talked about the math operators. We could throw in the modulus and exponents in here too. Exponents are going to be, we didn't do any exponents. Let's go ahead and just do that in the interactive shell. All right, so let's go 3, dot, dot, 3. Okay, that's 3 to the 3rd. All right, 3 cubed. Steve says, if a variable is a reserved memory location to store values, can you tell Python which part of the memory to store the value? The answer to that is no, Steve. Okay. Steve says, as a variable is a reserved memory location to store values, can you tell Python which part of memory to store the value? So I think what you're asking, Steve, is can I tell it physically where to store the value? Is that what your question is? Where in RAM? Okay, what bytes in RAM do I want to store it? No. Okay, that's left to the interpreter and the operating system to do. All right, back to our presentation. So we looked at modulus and then we looked at exponents. Okay. So data types, we talked about those: integers, floating point, strings. Strings must be surrounded by the single quotation mark. String concatenation. All right, we did that. A variable is a memory area where you store values. The memory area has an assigned name or label, such as password. You assign the values to the variable, such as password is equal to 1234556. Very secure password. The first time you use a variable, it's initialized. Okay. After that, you can use it in your code. Some programming languages require that you initialize a variable before you use it. In Python, first time you use the variable, it's initialized. You can change the value of the variable or overwrite its value by simply using another assignment statement, such as password is equal to QWERTY. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's see, we have Python to v2 attendees are here. Let's go an up arrow. We know that it has 23 in it. Let's go ahead and change it to 30. All right, and then go ahead and invoke it again. And so the same variable now has a different value in it. Once again, not that different, I would say identical to other programming languages, but I'm not assuming